today we're going to talk about the self-directed learning component of this. When you ask the kid what happened at school, it's like, nothing. I didn't do anything. No one taught me anything. You're like, oh, really? It's pretty amazing that you went through a whole, 7 hours of school and no one taught you anything. So we're going to try to say like what's supposed to happen in that time and what we think happens a lot, and then a little bit on grading. So those are the two kind of topics we want to talk about today. All right, so yeah, all right. So this is a summit graphic, I guess we could call it. And for those of you who are in the education world, the old term when I was in teacher school was called the zone of proximal development. Anybody ever heard of that? That's just like where you can help people. Now that's kind of rebranded to like the term like embrace productive struggle. You learn when you encounter challenges. If you never have a challenge, then you're not really pushing yourself forward. An example, my soccer team yesterday played, we were in Amherst, and like first game of the season, we're all like worried, oh my God, what's gonna happen? We have some new guys who've never played before, some new kids. And we scored in the first 5 minutes, woo, yay, we're winning. And then we kept on scoring. We ended up winning like 14-0. Wow. And I had to teach them not to score to be good at sports. So they were all like, I hope the season isn't all this easy because we're not gonna get better as a team. I'm like, well, that's kind of a mature thing for 6th and 7th grade boys to say, not just everybody wants to score. So we didn't have a challenge yesterday in our soccer game. And the kids were bummed. They were bummed that they were not challenged by a quality team. So that doesn't always happen in school. We're like, oh, I'd love a really challenging project. Could you give me? But that's what we aim to do. What we aim to do is to figure out what is the appropriate next step for that kid. That's how it's personalized. So, but before we just help them, they've got to know what they don't know. They have to wade in a little bit and find, well, what do you know? And then where can we help? Our rule with the administration team is 3 before me, like before I go, oh my gosh, Mrs. Nagy's being a real problem. Mr. Vicka, can you get down here and take care of Mrs. Nagy? I have to document, well, what have I done 3 times? Like, hey, Mrs. Nagy, can you stay off your phone? Or, Mrs. Nagy, can you stop sending notes? Or whatever, like I have to do my piece first. We try to tell the kids the same kind of idea. Don't just run to me with, I don't know how to do this. What did you do? I don't know. What's this project about? I don't know. So that's the kind of idea. And these 16 habits of success, these are I don't know, you want to talk about these? You put this picture in here.
Sure, I really just put this picture in because I really like this part here about the students should have the opportunity to see what they can figure out before having strategies or ideas explained to them. I think one of the big pushbacks we tend to get from students with focus areas is they just want us to tell them what the content is, to explain it to them. And I feel like as a teacher, it's really hard because I want to be like, oh, let me just sit down and I'll just explain the whole thing to you. But we really want them to learn how to go out and start looking for information on their own, and then when they get stuck, to come and see us. So that way they're learning how to work through things rather than us just constantly handing them the information. I was working with my incoming 2nd grader last night on her summer reading homework, which has been just a real struggle. But I noticed with her, she does the exact same thing that I feel like we're trying to push our students to do. She needed to know how to spell something. And I said, well, look in the book, it's probably in there. And she's like, well, but I know how to do that. Can you just tell me how to spell it? And it's like, well, no, we have to learn how to do this without an adult sitting there next to you. So I think that is one of the big things that we really try and do with the focus areas is teach the kids how to go out and find the information. And it's not that we're not there to teach it to them, but we're there when they need help. So trying to get them to push themselves a little bit farther.
So that's the self-efficacy, the growth mindset. I was turned on to this concept of growth mindset probably about 6 years ago, and it absolutely shaped how I see everything. I'm guessing everybody's heard of growth mindset, right? So not everybody gets the growth mindset. That's students, parents, teachers as well. Some people are still kind of in the, well, you're good at math or you're not good at math. There's no math gene. The science got to tell you that that's not a reality. That's not a thing. There's no art gene. There's no music gene. There's none of that stuff. There might be a whiny gene. I think if I had to. But so these kind of things right here, these habits, this is what we need to teach the kids. And this is what, in my opinion, this is what mentoring in OA is about. So we have the project-based piece, which we've talked about. We have cool projects. We have the mentoring, like the mentoring piece, that's like building the relationship. But if we don't focus on habits of success, this whole concept is rough to maintain well. And so I think in the classrooms, we're having greater efficacy of how all this works. We have people who work on this. Sometimes it's overt, like today, we're gonna do a growth mindset activity. I've done, sometimes it's just like the self-efficacy, like teaching you how to be, as Mrs. Nagy said, how to be effective on your own time. So these are huge. And this is where I'd love all of us to put more focus on our time. In the classroom, in mentoring, in OA. A lot of kids just start, I'm not good at such and such. I'm a bad writer. I'm trying to push my son into advanced English because I want him to move more towards AP classes as he goes through high school. He said, well, I'm just not good at writing. Like, well, not too many people are born good at writing. It takes a lot of practice, and it's frustrating. And so I'm trying to go over growth mindset even for my own kids. Any questions on any of that kind of stuff? All right, so that's kind of the idea and the thought behind SDL. So we might say SDL a lot, just making sure we know that it's self-directed learning. We used to call it, what do we call it? PLT.
But I don't remember what that.
I don't remember what PLT stands for. Personalized learning time. And so we're moving away. So even some of the old, if you go for help on the Summit site to look at like videos, they might call it PLT, personalized learning time. So this is the personalized part of it. We don't let all the projects wide open at a time. Exploring focus areas and content that's a pace they can do, but it's kind of like, how do you want to learn? Do you want to watch the videos? Do you want to read the stuff? Do you want to work in a small group? Do you want to be off by yourself? Can you demonstrate that? There's kids who are like, can I just go in the hallway? And it's just that lack of the distraction of the class. Some of those kids have to prove to me that they're capable of working in the hallway and not just using it to watch YouTube videos. So those kind of things, that's where they're using time effectively. Often in self-directed learning time, if there's a group of people who are like, hey, we're struggling with such and such, this is where we make groups. Like I see Colleen do this. You want to talk about how you do that in math like all the time, or?
Well, I feel, since I teach algebra, math I think is one of those tricky subjects that there are students who can go on and look at resources and watch a video and follow it step by step and understand it. And there's a whole group of students that can't at all. So when we have our SDL time, I usually give them the option. Your SDL today, if you want to work with me, you're up here. If you want to work on your own, you're back there. And then the kids that work with me, we go through and we kind of do traditional like notes. Just to work through examples and make sure they're understanding the topics before I send them off to practice stuff on their own. And then there's lots of kids in my class that want to do it on their own. And so they'll go in and I always put my notes into the platform as well, so they can go on and just follow my notes and do it on their own. Some of them go in and look at the other resources that are in there and figure it out. And then usually at the end of my self-directed time, I have something that they do kind of like an exit ticket, so that I can see the kids who chose to work on their own, whether or not they actually got something from working on their own, and those who maybe chose to work on their own and aren't able to do the activity, maybe next time they're in my group, and they don't have quite as much choice until they prove that they can do it on their own.
You guys want to comment on how that works in 6th grade, or?
Very similar. I'll have like a topic of the day that that I'm going to be leading that group. And it might be on a focus area, it might be a checkpoint in a project that I have a group of students who are struggling with. So it just depends on the day. So I'll have my topic for the day. Anyone who wants to work with me, or sometimes it's my idea for them to work with me. They come and work with me while the rest are working on something that they have chosen to work on. Because a lot of times, every time during SDL, everyone's working at different points. Some people have mastered that content, other people are still working on it. So it's kind of, where are you? Do you need to be in my group, or are you okay to be on your own? But again, at the end of the period, it's you have to prove to me, what did you do during that time? Were you making good choices during that time, and did you use your time wisely?
Right, pretty much very similar stuff.
I know at least Mr. Honick focused this on or had the high school teachers focus on this. They want, since we have these 85-minute blocks, sometimes kids can get like mentally lost in like where am I going? They want a big like a wrap up at the end of each period of like, hey, what's going on? And since we don't have bells, it's kind of nice because then I determine when you leave the classroom. It's not like some arbitrary ding and then everybody goes. It's like we watch the clock, but then I can say, okay, here we go. What are we talking about? What makes sense? Okay, yeah, you got, you go 15 seconds earlier. It's been, ooh, it's a nice day. Or, and so then we do that little wrap up to like bring it back together, even though people were like all over the place. So that's kind of how we use what we call SDL time. In the past, when 80% of the grades are or 70% of the grade were projects and 30% of the grade were focus areas, the expectation was 70% of the class time was working on projects and 30% of the class time was working on focus areas. I will assume, I could be wrong here, that we'll probably bump that to now 80% of our class time should be spent working on projects, and that's the checkpoints and such, and then 20% of the time will be on the focus areas, the content side of things. So Mr. Vick hasn't said that yet, but I'm guessing we're going to have something around those lines. If a kid uses their class time well, they probably don't have huge amounts of homework. They will probably be able to get many things done. I don't know if I said this in this group, but, and I know Colleen can attest to this, I am an inefficient person who uses my time during the school day. So I know that I'm going to have homework. I know that I'm going to have to do a lot of grading at home or a lot of prep at home because I talk all the time to everybody. So like I don't use my class time well, so then I know that means that I must use time outside of school to be ready for school the next day. That's true of kids. The kids who can just sit in a corner and rock things out, they don't have a lot of homework. One of my ninth grade students last year, he never did homework and was going so quickly through English, we kicked him into advanced English. And I'm like, dude, you need to go there. So that's highly variable. And if your kids are behind, it's often because they don't know how to use their class time in school well. And we have to teach them how to do that. We all have sixth graders, right? So we have to teach them how do you sit down and make a task that is doable in 15 minutes. And a lot of kids, it's Post-it notes, like, hey, I need you to get these 3 things done, and then come show me. So all those kinds of things, we teach them how to do that. And that's a big part of Mr. Hicks' OA class, so he'll go through a lot of that stuff. We're talking about focus areas a bunch. So the focus areas are the quizzy little things. So this top row is projects we talked about here. All classes from everything in 6th grade up through this is an AP Lit class are structured the same way. So the top row are projects, and then we have power focus areas, additional focus areas, and some courses have challenge focus areas. So in order to complete the course, and that complete means different stuff between middle school and high school. I don't think anyone's ever been held back for not completing a class in middle school. There was some talk about doing that at the end of last year, but once that rumor got out, the kids were like, oh no, this is not cool. And then they all like totally kicked butt for the rest of the year. It was pretty unbelievable. So a lot of research says you shouldn't hold kids back in middle school. It doesn't do a lot of good. But that's where we used to have like summer school and stuff, and we didn't have that last year because we didn't have a school with which to have class in during the summer because of instruction. So this year they're now 14% of the grade. They're the most important course content. So this is the stuff you've got to know, think power standards within the state, Ohio State standards. Most of this is covered within class to some different degree. As Mr. Fickle said, he's going to say hey, for this thing here, this is what you got to know about this. I tend to lecture maybe 40 to 50% of power focus area stuff, and then the kids need to do a little bit on their own. Reason being, I hope that all of them after high school learn how to learn on their own. That's our real goal, is to get them to not live in our basements when they're 19 and 20 years old. So there are assessments that you can take with these. They are always 10 questions. And so we cannot change that. It's unchangeable. So they take 10 questions. For almost every single course, I think some of the high school courses you can get a 7 out of 10 to pass. But you need an 8 out of 10 to pass that assessment. Your grade does not change if you have an 8 or a 9 or a 10. You have demonstrated that you know it enough to, like, that's the first step of your understanding. Most of the teachers want the kids to show what they're doing on paper. For math, that is absolutely required. If they don't show that, most math teachers will strike that grade. It'll be invalidated, and then they'll have to do that assessment again. Even for high school science, I make kids tell me, what are you thinking on question number 1? There's no record of your thoughts. That's like showing your work in math is a record of your thought. Like in social studies and science, like, what are you thinking? So if you get it wrong, I can go back and help you and say, like, oh, I see you were thinking of the Ming Dynasty, not the Qing Dynasty, but that's the thing. So, like, you want to know how it works.
If I can jump in for 1 minute too and go back to the 10-question assessment. Those questions are randomized, and there's a large bank of questions, so they're not getting the same 10 questions every time. It'll be different questions if they do not pass the assessment and have to take it again. So they're not just memorizing the answers to be able to take it again. They still have to prove that they are mastering the material at hand.
And there are, yeah, thank you. I'm kind of a jerk, so some of my tests have 80 question bank because kids try, and I did it for the first one, so they learn that it's not a successful strategy to just take. And that's something that happened earlier in our evolution of how we did this process. We really try to limit the number of times that the kids take the assessment now, because it's a poor use of your time. Like, how often do you want to redo things?
Learning Farm, I don't know if you guys know that.
I
but
did hear that,
Learning
yes.
Farm in 5th grade, that's what they were doing. So.
I have friends in other districts that were using that. I didn't hear
Yeah.
that.
So they were just going,
Yeah, they were just taking it, because I was like, well, and she's like, oh, so-and-so just does it over and over and over again.
yeah, so that's
Yeah.
not,
And I know if there's one doing it, they're all.
yeah, because they,
I was like, you're not doing it.
so, if I was as aware of school as I am now when I was their age, what they should do is when you take the assessment, write the question down. Write the answers down. Like, I make my kids have a testing notebook. And then what we want them to do is when you don't pass, it even tells you what content you don't know, and then circle back to that content and do more. But if you take the time to write all the questions down and write the answers down, then you really know, like, actually specifically what you don't know. And they don't do it. Like, they're like, oh, well, that would take, like, so much time. I'm like, yeah, I know. And then that's when the learning happens. It's like, so you can, like, I'm a firm believer that you can learn during a test. Like, you don't have to learn before the test. You can even learn during the test and then reviewing the test. And so they don't do that as much. I would love to see them do that. Like, I'd love
You
to.
do screenshots.
Yeah. Well.
I don't know how that's, like,
So we know, like, if I think, Brian, you're not doing well, I will make him take his test with his computer towards me. And we have, like, areas of the classroom where you take your assessments and the computer's this way, and so I can see what's going on. Because you can see the flashes on the glasses and all those kind of things. We can tell when you're switching tabs. We had them convinced for a long time that you could only have one tab open and we would know. And then someone figured it out. That's total BS.
And we do, in 6th grade, we have testing stations.
Yeah.
And they take their assessment right where I can see their screens. So they aren't, I mean, and they are only allowed to have the one tab open that's, you know, the testing screen tab. So you can see their test the entire time they're taking it. And as far as like how many times they take the test, I wish Mr. McHugh was here because he would know the average last year. We averaged out over the year what was the average amount of times a student took a focus area, and it was like, I believe in 6th grade it was like 1 point something times, which means the majority of the students had to take an assessment 1 or 2 times in order to be able to pass it. Well, if you go to your driving, if you have a student who's been to driving school and they go to take that, they have 4 chances to pass that assessment before they have to retake any classes or anything like that. So the average time in 6th grade was, I believe, less than 2 times on average to pass those assessments. So if they tell you they're taking their assessment thousands of times, it's not happening. Because at that point, we're pulling that child aside and saying, you know, there's some disconnect here. Let's sit down together and let's go over this material and figure out what is it that you aren't understanding.
And those are the grade level norms. So 6th grade, all the grades have certain like levels of expectations. We have said that if you failed it or you didn't pass, I want to come back on the term fail in a second. Like, if you didn't pass it after the second time, it's a one-on-one conversation with your teacher and say like, okay, what are you missing here? I'll show you what it looks in here. When you don't pass it, It tells you exactly what chunks of the material you've done well on, and then you can go, oh, I don't need to go objective 1 anymore. I know objective 1, I need to spend some time on objective 2 or 3. So we have a little testing sheet that we have the kids use, and then they're supposed to go back and say, hey, this is what I've done. They don't like to do that. They don't like to do that kind of stuff. But the side issue is that's only 14% of your grade. Like, I don't want to spend all of my time managing this 14% of the grade. What should be happening is this information that is in the 14% of your grade is gone over through the projects, and that really what cements the learning. This is like the intro to the learning, and then the project cements it by the kids using that kind of knowledge. So those are power focus areas. In high school, if you do not finish these, like by the end of the year, you get a 0, and you may fail a course if you don't get far enough through courses. The first year we did this, nobody failed, but we had like 5 weeks of summer school, which was horrible. And then the next year we're in like single digits with the number of kids in 9th grade who have to repeat courses. And in the past, before Summit, Mr. Vicka told me it was like 30% of 9th graders had to repeat courses. So this has absolutely cut down the number of kids who have to repeat. But it still happens for kids who really drag their feet. They get to see me again. So the additional focus areas, this is the not extra credit. I think every single time you hear the word additional focus area, someone has to say it is not extra credit. It is required for your grade, but in high school and even in 6th grade, you don't have to do them to pass the course. Like tell the kids, you don't have to wear deodorant. You don't have to brush your teeth. It just makes all social interactions much more smooth. So you don't have to do these, but you're here, you care about your kids' education, my guess is you're going to make your kids do these, and I think that you should. Last year I was a jerk, and I kept moving them around, and the 9th graders did not like that in the beginning of the year, but they loved it at the end of the year when almost everybody had all of them done. So if I would put everything in one line, like all of it's required for the state test, then they'd go very, very quickly, and they'd freak out over the pace which they had to do them. So I just would move them around, and they got mad at me. Too bad. But they did well, so I'm happy. So this is 6% of the grade. It's really hard to go for the A without the 6. It used to be 9% of the grade, so it was like a full letter grade. Since we've had more of an impact or more of an emphasis on projects, so that's decreased. Everything else is the same about them. So they're a little bit less important. They're not like the power standards. They're like ancillary material they have to learn. And sometimes, like I know in some of the math classes, you can't even like jump into some of these until you've done other stuff. So that gets kind of weird. So the kid's like, I can't do more trigonomic functions because trigonomic functions are here. Like, so it gets kind of weird. So sometimes believe them when they say those kinds of things. But if they're like, I have no homework to do, you're like, really, you have nothing to do for all of your class school. You can open this up and see if they've attempted, starting to work on additional focus areas. That's almost always the kids, especially those high achieving kids who are really working. Almost nobody has all their additional focus areas done. So that's where I try to push kids who are really trying to go.
Did they talk about, diagnostic assessments at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we did but not enough. Maybe you can talk about diagnostic.
Well, just in all of these assessments, whether it's power additional or even the challenge, there's diagnostic assessments that the kids can take at the beginning to decide see what they know so they know what to study. I know a lot of times in math what I'll have them do is wait until we've covered the material or they've covered the material and then take the diagnostic as like their pre-test to see if they're ready to take the actual test. Even though the actual focus area assessment can only be 10 questions, we can make the diagnostics as long as we want. So for topics that I know are going to trip the kids up, I tend to make the diagnostic like 20 questions, so that way they're forced to do more practice before they can take the actual test.
Some of them, however, are like 4. Like I remember when we first did this, like didn't you have like a focus area in the brain or something?
Yeah, most of the diagnostics though we've changed in 6th grade, so almost all of them have at least 10 questions. We tried to do an average of 10 because some of them, brain and nervous system, there was like 2 questions. I've mastered the material every now and I got.
And my oldest kid was in her class. He's like, I'm gonna take this tomorrow. I'm like, what's that? He's like, the brain and nervous system. I'm like, you don't know anything about the brain or nervous system, dude. He's like, no, I
got 100%.
I got 100% the diagnostic. I'm like, that's 2 questions, right? You don't know anything about the brain and nervous system. So lo and behold, he didn't pass that the first time. So shocker. So Yeah, that was one of my early beats with all of this, is the diagnostics weren't full. For the hard ones in science, I try to make them 20 questions, so that you really know exactly what you know and you don't know. And when a student does not pass, like if you don't get the 80%, there's a huge difference between getting a 2 and getting a 6 or a 7. And we treat those kids differently. If you got a 2, you were not prepared to take that assessment. And that's what it should tell all of us, students, parents, teachers. You jumped into that and you weren't ready. If you get a 6 or a 7, that's like a minor celebration. You've only got 1 or 2 things that you don't know well enough yet before you should take it again. And so the kids get bumped. Now, if there's a kid getting a 6, 7 a couple times in a row, then that's where we have to, there's probably some kind of roadblock that we all need to figure out, like, what's that roadblock? How do we help you overcome that roadblock? So they get super bummed with 6s and 7s, and I try to, like, she's like, hey, that means you only need to learn 3 or 4 more things. I'm like, brooding, it's not working. But that's what, like, how we try to phrase those kind of things. So those were power and additional. Some classes have challenge focus areas, and these are for that 1 or 2% of kids who are just utterly bored in your class and like, wow, this is a piece of cake, I don't need to do this. Not all classes have them. I've never had a student pass a biology challenge focus area. So they're kind of like, hey, you think you might want to take AP bio? Look, here's what it looks like. So I don't know if anyone
I don't have challenge focus.
Yeah, so they're not super common. They could be something if we happen to have a kid in class and they're rocking, the teacher could just make some challenge focus areas and assign them. I did tell a kid if they passed all of them, I'd give them 1% extra credit to their grade, and no one's ever passed any of them. It's almost not worth doing unless you really have rocked all of your projects. So if your projects are amazing and the kid's just like bored, go to challenge focus areas. There's one kid who in 8th grade did, I think, almost all of 8th and 9th grade and essentially skipped 9th grade social studies and English, and he'll be in my AP Bio class next year as a 10th grader and in all 11th grade social studies and English courses, because he just is a rock star and works his butt off all the time. So
the challenge focus areas do not affect your grade
Yes.
in any way, which is another reason why if you haven't finished the power focus and the additional, you would definitely not be working on the challenge. But it's not gonna affect your grade if you pass it or don't pass it. It doesn't change the grade.
yeah, it's just like, hey, I want more. Cool, try this. All right, so that was what focus areas were. I'd like to show this in the demo site quickly, so you can see what these look like from a kid point of view. So if any of you, I think I showed you how to go to, anyone have a device they want to try to do this right now? So it is demo.summitlearning.org, and this is where you can go through and you can see what it looks like from a kid or a teacher, and when you log in, it'll make you put in like fake email addresses and stuff. So I'm gonna go in as a kid, Lee Y, and we'll go to their year view so we can see that kind of view of what's going on. So Lee is struggling right now. So when you see the focus areas in red, that means they haven't passed them and the time has gone past. So here we have the reading. We can see Lee scored a 4 out of 10, and Lee's taken this twice. So this tells me Lee needs some help with that stuff. Like, this is our red flag to help them. This one here, Lee hasn't even attempted word meanings and nuances 7, and it's already gone past the time. So this is a fake kid, but it's to show, and we get kids like this. Like, there are absolutely students who drag their feet and they try to remain hidden in the deep, dark recesses of the classroom or the shadows. And we have the ability to use data to shine that flashlight in there and say, like, hey, how can we help you? Like, what's going on here? So if you see this, you can see what's going on. If I click on the that focus area for reading strategy, why is this here? So I can see here, I can see here where Lee is successful, and Lee did all right on objective 1. Like,
Blow that up a little more.
yeah.
We can actually see the score, how many of the
Oh,
questions.
upstairs.
Thank you.
So we could see she, I don't know what Lee is there, so, we got 3 out of 5, it's pretty good. But objective 2, not getting it. Like, and so this is where we would say, hey Lee, I need you to go through objective 2, and find something that can be helpful. So what could they do then, is they then click on objective 2, and then here are a bunch of resources, either put in there by Summit, or we cultivate our resources as well to see what's good and what's less good. And I can say, oh man, Lee, you know what I found? A whole bunch of kids have really liked looking at this comparing and contrasting with the Venn diagram. I mean, that's probably not true. I don't know if many people like Venn diagrams as much as science and math teachers. But, so they can go in here and they can say, this is where we want them to go. So there are resources there. We also can tell that Lee has not actually looked at any of these resources, because when a student has looked at a resource, it puts a check mark by it. Now, you'll know, the kids know that we know what they've looked on, so sometimes they'll just click, 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 oh, well, I've looked at all of these, well, where's your notes that you've done? Well, no, I didn't take it, I just watched it. Well, then go back, let's look at this again, and I need you to take notes on this. Mr. Hicks taught you how to take Cornell notes in no way. Let's go back through here. I would like you to try to do Cornell notes on this. A lot of the kids don't know how to watch a video and take notes. This kind of blew my mind until I realized, well, when would someone have taught someone to watch a video and take notes? So we teach them, how do you learn from watching a video? The kids are amazed to find out that you can pause educational YouTube videos. It's not just do perfect videos, you can pause all videos, and then you can write things down. They taught me more things about YouTube than I ever would have found on my own. So they can go to this, over here, these resources, and within the resources, there are learning strategies, and all of these kinds of things. How to study and take notes, so take notes on video resources. These are the kind of things that when I mentor a kid, if they're like, I don't know how to do this, and I don't have like an hour to show them how to do it, they're like, hey, take a look at this, and before we meet next time, let's talk about this. These are the kind of things that Mr. Hicks does a ton of in the Operation Advantage course for 6th graders. So we don't just say, hey, go learn about the French Revolution, see you in a couple weeks. We have a highly scheduled process for how we do different little pieces, and an involved process for when you're not making the progress that we'd like you to make. We can recommend what tool, and if those aren't working, we'll sit down and we have a conference with that kid. So there's all kinds of things in this resources page here. I'd be certain that kids do not go here, the vast majority of kids do not go here on their own. They have to be kind of guided there and pushed there. But if you're at home with a kid and they're saying things like, man, I have no idea how to prepare for assessment, if their kid says, I have no homework, they're like, all right, well, let's make sure you know how to find how to study with a friend. What does that mean? Is it just sitting in the same place and eating the same bag of Doritos? Is that studying with a friend? Or how do you do these kind of things? This is where you can push them when they're claiming to have no homework. They'll probably never tell you again they have no homework, but that's it. We know how they work. So that's kind of how a good place to go for more resources.
Can you go back to that year review again?
Yeah, for Lee.
So again, if Lee is your student and he's coming home saying, I don't have any homework, as a parent, first thing I would say is, can you show me your year view? And when I go right on this year view, I can tell right now, Lee has homework. Lee should be doing something. Now, again, we're working with them in mentoring, and we're sitting down with them and saying, like, okay, what's going on? How can I help you? Let's make some goals. What can I get done tonight? What can I get done this week? Lee might be saying to me as the mentor teacher, oh, I'm gonna turn everything green this week. That's a pretty high goal. And so as a teacher, I'm sitting down with Lee saying, well, let's take smaller steps. If you get this all done this week, that's fantastic. But let's make some achievable goals that we know we can get done so that we can feel successful. Because if I come to the end of the week and my goal was to make everything green, and then all of a sudden it's not all green, I'm gonna feel like I didn't achieve or accomplish what I had set out to do. So let's make smaller steps that we know are achievable, and we work on those goals to make small steps in passing those and turning those all green.
And, I'm sorry, I'm gonna jump in here. If you are looking at your student's screen and it looks like this and you have not heard from the teachers, I would 100% contact the teachers. Because what tends to happen if the kid starts to fall behind is then they get overwhelmed. And and then they get anxious, and then they don't wanna try anything because they have all this read and they don't know where to begin. And that's really where the mentor steps in and does exactly, excuse me, what she's saying, where we make small goals for them. But the goal kind of for all of us is to help them before we get to that point, so that we don't get there.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at this, and the very first project is cultural, then all the stuff in the power focus areas is associated with that first
That's the, yes.
project. And then so when they finish cultural, all that turns green, and then you move to the next one.
So, not exact, so they have to do the checkpoints for this, and I'll click on this.
Okay.
So the checkpoint, but ideally, these focus areas align with that project. So, like, the goal is always to have a vertical alignment with, this is the overarching project, this is the most important content, and this is the second most important content. But you have to do each one of them independently. Like, the kids will have to work on these individual checkpoints and submit them, and then they'll get assessed. And you have to pass these, these are the 10-question assessments, they'll have to do those independently as well. So I had a parent once say, like, this is ridiculous, for every class, like, my kid has 12 things to do all the time. What do you mean 12 things to do? And they were saying, 4 classes, 3 things going on here. I'm like, yes, you're right, technically you have 12 things to do at all time. But if I look at this lasts a month. Like, you have 12 things to do for 4 classes over a month. And I think that's actually easier for a lot of the kids to manage. My guess is your kids will get involved in stuff sooner or later. If you have a cross-country meet, if you have a band concert, if you have something, you don't absolutely have to do it by the very next day. And so that little bit of this time component here makes it easier to manage the 3 things for each of your 4 main courses. And then they'll be in language, so they'll have a lot of things to do, but they have some leeway. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
So, this is not good. Like, if this was my kid, I would be very mad at all of my students' teachers. Like, this is not acceptable. So, that being said, there are my kids that I mentored last year looked exactly like this, and a lot of them had just stuff going on, like just things that were like school was not first in their lives at that point. So, that's kind of how we let's help that kid first and then help what's going on. The other thing, as Mrs. Nagy was saying, if the kids get behind with this and they build up that anxiety, where do the kids go when they're feeling anxious and frustrated? What's the first thing they turn to? Anyone want to guess? Cell phones. And they're feeling bad, they're feeling lousy, they jump on that cell phone. And so then it's just, now we have to get them off their cell phone, oh, what's going on, and all these kind of things. Now in middle school, cell phones are supposed to be kept in the lockers. So they don't have that ability. In the high school, that's a huge struggle. They're like, I just need to chill for a while. I'm like, no, you need to send someone a Snapchat about lunch or something. I don't know. So that is my struggle. We don't want to get to this point, because then once we get to this point, we got a lot of work to do to get that kid back, to be able to help them to be successful. Anything else? Mr. Vicka, Wyman, guests of honor, so far so good. All right, so those were, did you have anything else you want to say about, I guess, looking at this kind of stuff? Now, there are plenty of kids who are more like Ali, and they just rock right through everything, and they're going very, very quickly. So, like in science here, this kid this is probably, I don't know, April, right? That they've worked on their assessments. I don't think this is necessarily a good strategy either. Like, I don't think, and I have a kid who loves to do this all the time, right? He was in their classes last year. He wants to no, finishing isn't, like, he wants to be fast and not thorough. So my battle with my middle child is, let's be thorough over fast, because the kids do this, and then, as you had pointed out, this material is working on this project, so it doesn't really serve you to just go ahead. I'd rather let's do these additionals. Let's stay within what is supposed to happen. It is hard to convince many kids, how about instead of doing this, you go back and make this project better. You revise this project, you edit this project, you figure out how you can improve upon that project. because that's a much more valuable skill than just, you know, blitzkrieging through focus areas. But we definitely see kids who want to do that, and that's almost a harder conversation. They're like, why would you let me do work? I'm like, it's just not in your best interest. So I don't think, I would rather them not do this as well. But you've seen these kids, I mean, it's.
Right, and I'll have other students who are, let's say, in science, they're all the way up where that one is at organizing something, and maybe they don't have any focus areas past in math, and I'm like, and again, as a mentor, I'm sitting down with that student saying, I am so happy that you are moving ahead in science, like, that's awesome, but what class are we struggling in? And they're like, I know I haven't done anything in math, and I'm like, you're right, you haven't, why haven't we done anything there? Let's take a break from science, as much as I hate to say that. Let's take a break from science and let's try to get one of these math ones done. So we do have students that will do that also. They know they're good in science, they know they like science, and they'll push ahead through all those science ones, but they're kind of forgetting about those other subjects. So we're trying to teach them, let's look at the whole picture. We don't have just one class we're taking, we're actually taking 4 or 5 classes.
So the other things that you can help kids with is when everything is clickable and nothing can be programmed. So just go in there and click to your heart's content. Here we can see, I think this is Xenia, has attempted this one once and this one never. So when you go through the kids, and again, I've never gone through the parent view, I've only ever just said, hey child, please open up your computer, let's look at this. You can tell how many times they've taken it, when's the last time they took any assessment. Like if they haven't taken any assessments in 3 weeks, that's another issue. Like that's the mentor should be like, hey, I see you haven't done anything for a while, what's going on here? They can say, well, I've got a bunch of projects due, so maybe there's a reason. And, so that's the kind of information that you can get from these kinds of screens. So I am pushing for Summit to give us the lack of information. Like I want the last time a kid has done something information. And we can kind of see that in one screen, but it's not super easy. Yeah.
Do parents see the same exact thing, same exact information? as
Yes.
students do now?
Yes, there used to be more of an issue because you didn't have access to their Google Drive and their docs, and so like you couldn't see the work. But that's all gone with their new notebooks, is their new Google Doc that they're using. So yeah, I don't know. I haven't gone through the parent view recently as it's been changed. But I think it's easier if with the kid to know that you're looking at it at the same time. You know, then you're not like I told my children, when you go to bed, I might scroll through Snapchat on your phone. You know, like I don't know if I want to do that next to them all the time. I can get real awkward. But so so those kind of things, I think it's a better relationship builder when we do it together instead of me saying, well, I want to be your platform. You've got 3 reds. What's the deal? But like sometimes those are things that have to happen anyways.
And again, as a teacher, I have a little bit more data to look at than the student might have. This is the student view again, so this student has taken this assessment once, and I can see that in objective 1, they got 0 out of 3 questions. In objective 2, they got 0 out of 3 questions. I can actually break that down more and look at how long did the student spend on that assessment, which a lot of times when I click on that in my teacher view, they've spent, and this is not a joke, like literally 1 minute and 30 seconds on a 10-question assessment, and I'm like, okay, as a teacher, I probably couldn't even read all 10 questions within 1 minute and 30 seconds and actually think about answering that. So that's another conversation that we have, is that you're only spending 1 minute and 30 seconds on this assessment and you're expecting to pass it. So that's another conversation we might have, is let's actually go through that assessment and let's take our time on each question. Let's read each question and figure out what are they asking in the question, what answers am I looking at. So another factor that is huge, especially at the beginning of the year with the 6th graders, is I just want to click through and take that assessment and see what grade I get, and hope that maybe I passed it.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't matter if you get an 8, 9, or 10. Like it's all the same. You've met the threshold, and you can move along. One of the hard things for some kids to know in the beginning is when is the best time for me to take an assessment in each teacher's course. So we're doing office hours Tuesday mornings, like just Tuesdays since our year, or Tuesdays. So that's a great time. Tuesday mornings they can come in, they can show their teacher, and that's Tuesdays at 7:40. Yeah, 7:45. Tuesday 7:45, come in and say, here's my notes, I'm prepared for this assessment, I would like to take this with you right now. And that's a great time, because it's just the teacher having office hours in their classroom, ready to help whoever shows up. We do not have many after-school opportunities for kids to be able to do that stuff. I don't know when Mr. Hicks will, if or when he will allow assessments in OA. Does he do that at all? Or-
Not at the beginning of the year, but as the year goes on, we'll offer assessment time. Generally, for all of us, they can take assessments anytime we do SDL time. So that would be, again, that 20% of our teaching time, would be, you can bring your notes up and I can look at it, make sure that you, look like you've mastered the material, and then I can approve that assessment. So during SDL time, which we all offer, and they can take a social studies assessment during my SDL time also, as long as they've proven that they're able to take that assessment.
I know some of the high school math teachers only allow math and math. I don't know how you guys roll in sixth grade.
If it's their first assessment, they can, if it's the first time they're taking that assessment, they can take it with anybody. If it's their second attempt, they have to take it with that subject area teacher.
And some of the times, I'll tell kids, like, a lot of times they get tripped up on language and stuff. And so there's actually part of the Apple computers is if you can triple click a word and it gives you a definition. Like, it just tells you. So if you write a focus area assessment that's only vocab, the kids can learn how to do this. They're generally not. They're generally like using vocab. So I try to teach them very early, you should use this. Like, this is how you learn new words. And if you really want to make me happy, if you don't know the word diagnostic, write it down on your testing sheet and write down the definition of diagnostic to help you like learn all this vocab. So there are little tools that are built in here. I playfully call this like cheat effectively, like cheat within the rule. Like, this is okay, like learn the rules. Now they can't do this on state tests, like it doesn't work. This is disabled on state tests. So you still have to know vocab, but learn that vocab. Learn while you're taking that assessment so that the next time you come here, you know what that word means. Biology is almost a foreign language to most kids. It's like super wordy. So I'm like, yeah, you have to do this. And sometimes if you just, they'll click on it like the word producer, and they think it means people who help make movies. I'm like, no, that's like a plant, produces, food. They don't read the second definition. Like there's a definition, and there's, oh, look, there's a science definition. So we teach them how to use dictionaries, all these kind of things. All right, so I think that's probably enough on focus areas. I'll do his focus area questions. Anyone? Do you have the data, or remember the number of the sixth grade winning data last year, Melanie? By
The
chance?
average attempts.
The average attempts for sixth
That was
grade.
like 1.7.
It's very
Right
low.
around- Yeah, very low.
Across the board.
Yeah, okay, that sounds right.
Okay.
Significantly decreased.
It's like 85%, 9% of assessments are passed on the first or second try. It's only about 10% that ever go to a third, and of those, those 10%, about 3% go over the third. It's the vast majority of them.
I found that most of the roadblocks are not the content, but it's test taking strategies and skills. Like,
Thought of an ad, like, we didn't make things easier, we slowed things down.
yeah,
So we saw the first couple of years, kids rushing and quick, and we put in a set of norms at each grade level to slow them down and actually say, hey, like, you have to produce notes before we let you take this. And then if you're gonna take it again, there's a process that you have to, be involved in as a teacher. You can't just go take it again. You have to have some sort of remediation, intervention between those assessment dates.
and so some of the, like, I was very much a authority challenging kind of lad in my middle school days. And the kids are like, well, it says I have to have a page of notes, and you have a page of notes. It's like the largest handwritten font you have ever seen in your entire life. You're like, no. Well, it's a page. Yeah, I know it's a page. I was much like you when I was your age. I know exactly what you're doing. The page of notes is a benchmark to help you demonstrate you have like some level of content knowledge. So you may hear that, no, I'm taking an assessment, I have a page of notes. And then, oh, can I see that page of notes? And then it's, size 2,000 font. And you're like, yeah. So again, there's more of them than there are of us. They're all gonna find their ways. And we all need to just work together to funnel them towards the best choices. All right.
I have a tip. If you didn't talk about this, how to use the diagnostic as a study tool. Did you talk about that?
We didn't.
So if you look at the diagnostic, look at the playlist, so just bring up a playlist.
Yeah.
when students, say, I don't have any homework, I can't do anything, I'm stalled out because I need to have the teacher open the assessment before I can take it, I can't do that till office hours, so I need to play Fortnite. You can say, okay, so together, let's look at the diagnostic, which is always at the top. And kids will say, not all kids, but some kids will say, I'm only allowed to take that once. You can take that umpty gunda times. And every time you do it, you'll be presented with a variety of questions that may be repeats or may be new and may show up on the assessment you eventually take, because they're coming from the bank. So you can have your student, have your child take the diagnostic with you and sort of demonstrate to you that he or she is ready for the actual assessment. So in the process, they'll pick up some more information, you can talk about it, they can go into a little bit of depth, you can see the answers and the explanations. It's a good tool to, as Mr. Ficker says, slow them down a little bit and make sure that the other information is solidly in place. Does that make sense? And when you have your hands on it, you'll see, it's pretty easy.
I suggest this is where they make sure they know all the certain content vocab. If there's a word in the diagnostic you don't know, write it down. Now, I would have pushed back to these things when I was there. It just work. It's a challenge. It's much easier for me to stand in front of a kid and say, mitochondria is, and everyone only knows the meme, powerhouse of the cell. No one knows what a powerhouse is, though. Like, the kids will say powerhouse of the cell. It's power. So, like, go through here, learn the content, learn what those words mean.
Mr. Bruning, there's actually a term for that. They're called tier 3 vocabulary words when they are specific to a content area. And every content's got its own tier 3 vocabulary. Tier 2 are important as well because they're the test-taking words, like compare and contrast. You've all seen them all 100 times. Which one of these is the exception? Those are called tier 2. If you don't, you could know a lot about the subject, but if you don't know those tier 2 words that they use to ask the questions, you're out of luck. So tier 2 and then tier 3 is specific to the content area. OBE, the Ohio Department of Education, is really hammering tier 2 and tier 3 vocabulary this fall.
I think it's worth noting too that the feedback they've received probably over the last 5 years, we've really been paying attention from the kids taking the ACT, is they didn't know vocabulary. And our main struggle with kids on the ACT was they didn't understand the vocabulary. So all of our rubric vocabulary associated with this program is ACT level vocabulary. So while they might initially struggle with it, Andy's given some great examples of, we don't let you go around it, we want you to learn it. And we've already talked to some kids that took this, took the ACT last year, and vocabulary was all of a sudden not so big of an issue anymore. So I thought that was one positive coming out of this as well.
So the other thing that happens sometimes when the kids are taking an assessment is they get stuck. And different teachers approach helping during focus area assessments different ways. With my students in 9th grade, if you come and it's your first attempt and you have no notes and you've done nothing to prepare yourself, I will not help you because you haven't done the work beforehand. You just assume that I'm going to jump in. Some teachers will give you like the non-content vocab, like as Mrs. Wentz, the tier 2. I will make sure that you understand what synthesis means or analysis means or any of those kinds of words that aren't really the biology stuff. I'm trying to make sure you know what the question asks. So that's where I'll try to help you with those kind of things. But I only want to help the kids who come prepared because so many kids, like the kids in the past who they get pushed through because they're nice and they don't cause discipline problems. There's those kids who get up to 11th and 12th grade and we're like, man, you're really nice, but I don't know that you can write a paragraph. And we have failed that child. So that's where, you're nice and you're quiet, you do what I want to do, and you buy me Starbucks gift cards and all those wonderful things, right? But you don't know what you're talking about. So that's where it's a little bit different for each kid. So like, well, they helped Kristen, but why don't they help Brent? Well, there's reasons why I help Kristen and not Brent. And it's not up to, I don't tell all the kids why those kind of things happen. Kristen may need different help than Brent needs. And so So we do those kinds of things. It's mostly your level of preparedness. You know, some kids, depending on what their IEP may say, some kids have 0 focus areas. They don't take focus areas. I had a student a couple years ago, was a refugee from Syria, didn't speak English very well. I didn't think it was appropriate to give that student English focus areas. I could not get them translated. So in one of your courses, you guys have completely new focus areas for some kids who they're not quite at 6th grade level. They bump them down a bit. So there's all kinds of variability. We have the ability to kind of change things. So it might be different for different kids. I don't know what kind of population you have in the room. So if the kids are complaining that some people get something else, that's, yes, they do. It's intentional. Yeah.
This is a kind of a big question. So Summit is a huge change from what many of us grew up with more traditional, which is teaching, testing. So is there any kind of like an outline or a process where we can prioritize and help our kids prioritize? This is probably an OA question. So we can kind of, because the expectations are a lot simpler in the old style, right? So how can we help them prioritize expectations in this new style, and for us to help prioritize expectations?
So what I know a few of us use is I have a Google slide presentation called Today in Biology, where I have prioritized what my students need to do. And it's a Google slide that every day I add, you know, what's going on. If you look in this view here, it is prioritized by project, power, additional. So like per class, this is where you should spend 80% of your time, because it's 80% of your grade. So is that kind of what you're getting at, or?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at, but I'm also thinking about the fact that they're doing this for, what, 6 classes, or?
They'll have 4, well, they'll 5 classes. They'll have their 4,
Yeah.
English, social studies, math, science, and then STEAM in 6th grade. And STEAM is kind of a fun class, so like,
Yeah.
I don't think it's really as.
And so the year view would help us, obviously, it's very graphic,
Yeah.
and it does help us see that. Okay.
You agree, you're.
Another week where they actually
Okay.
put their goals in there.
And so, yeah, so, I don't know which of these kids actually.
So we actually help them, especially at the beginning of the year, as far as prioritizing what they need to work on. And here is their weekly view. And this is where on Mondays, in science, we go through and we fill out the week as a group. What should I be working on Monday? What should I be working on Tuesday? What should I be working on Wednesday? Those goals will be, as far as project, is checkpoint 1 due by Friday? Is checkpoint 2 due by whatever next week? It'll have what they should be working on as that, and then they'll also have focus area goals. So maybe it's they need to complete the vocab for structure of life. They need to do their KWL chart for structure of life. They need to do the study guide for structure of life. Or maybe it's that they need to take that assessment. So they have goals weekly as far as projects and as far as focus areas for what they should be working on. So their week view is a really good place. Nobody's moved. A really good place to go to.
And this is determined by the teacher, individual teacher?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I would say, like a lot of us start, like that's how high school uses Mondays a lot. I don't know if you guys do this, because Mondays are the shorter class periods. Is we lay out, this is our plan for the week. I give my students 5 minutes while I'm taking attendance. I put up these are my goals for your week, and so then I will say, this if you're caught up, this is what we're doing Monday, the Tuesday, Wednesday block, the Thursday, Friday block, and then so the kids are expected to go in there and put in their goals. And then when they're with their mentor, they may have individual goals that the mentor talks to the kid about and be like, I see you're struggling here, or I see, oh, you're really rocking right here. This could be your next step, but maybe, like that's where you help prioritize where do you go next. So that's where they should go. Most students do not like goal setting. And the kids who rock the goal setting absolutely thrive in this process. The kids who don't rock the goal setting, like Andy Bruning when he was in 6th and 7th grade, that's a struggle. I love this because I got to college and I had no clue how to do this. I knew how to play Super Nintendo, Tetris, but I did not know how to make a plan of how am I going to use my time well. So that's kind of how we help them to prioritize. And in the beginning, we tell them what you need. Like there's not a lot of variability, you know, September 6th of what's going on. They're not even gonna have their computers until probably the 10th or 12th or something. So we will teach them in the beginning, this is what you are doing. There is less personalization if you stay on, like personalization of pace if you stay on track. If you stay on track with your teacher, your personalization is how you exploring the content or how you demonstrating, you know, those kind of things. So when you get behind, that's when we all have to come together as a team of parent, some counselors are often in those, you know, teacher, how do we get this kid, you know, caught back up?
I see the missing link that I was like, really, you know.
There's a
But I
digital
under-
planner in here.
Yeah, the digital planner, okay.
And, like, it should be very, when the kid opens their computer, this is exactly what it goes to every time. It goes to the week view. So they have to click off of this to get to the year view. They love looking at the year view. But this is not specific enough, as with kind of what you pointed out, it is not specific enough to see what are all my courses. It's like knowing for homework, oh, here's my textbook, but like, well, what do I do with that textbook?
Right.
Like, so that's the syllabus and those kind of things. A lot of us make study guides per unit, so the kids, this is what you have to do. That link back to the checkpoints or playlists and say, these are the things that you definitely have to do, and if you don't do well on that, then maybe look at this one. So we have those kinds of, we pass those things out on for real paper. You know, we pass those things out for kids to work on.
Somewhere along the line, I missed the thing with the mentoring.
Mhm.
So, like, how are the kids like assigned a mentor? Like, and how? I mean, is it just like another teacher? Like,
Yeah, it's completely, it's pretty much
class
random.
And that's your teacher for that class, but you're calling a mentor. And
So the mentor teacher you are with, where's the schedule? You are with every single day for half an hour. So you have that mentor teacher, we'll see if I can find
so
that.
your mentor could also be your science teacher.
Yes.
Yes.
Generally it is. Generally it is one of your teachers that you have. Some of the mentors, I don't know the 6th grade mentors specifically, but some of them are like in the high school, the band director is a mentor. You know, like Mr.
Annie
Barry.
Krause, our
Yeah,
teacher.
our teacher's a mentor. Mr. Barry, you know, is a mentor. Like so, like the gym and all those other non-content area teachers, like the platform teachers, they'll be a mentor. And we have morning sessions. We do our collaborative time when we go like literally these people are here talk to the staff about like how do you do mentoring and how do you do this kind of stuff. And so they'll have it. Now they won't have one-on-one every day. So generally we're trying to like once every 7 or 8 days to have a 5 to 10 minute conversation. In the beginning of the year, those conversations are much longer. Of hey, I see where you're at. This is where you need to go. So that's where, and I don't know another district that does this right now. Maybe does somebody.
No, we've got a lot of districts that are trying to create this without having a platform in their district. And then I presented that Bell schedule of probably 150 schools already, and the biggest thing they focused in on is that mentoring, and what it looks like and how it works. I would also add to the mentoring, I mean, it's a rotation of, and the teachers kind of set up their own rotations of how they get the kids. The platform has a button, it's like a panic button for your kid, that if your kid needs that immediate check-in that day, they can hit that, the teacher gets a notification that, you know, little Johnny needs a check-in today, or if mentoring's already happened, you know, tomorrow, and then the teacher will get right to them. But, yeah, we usually set up, you know, mentoring in a rotation, I think 5 to 7 days is about accurate. We try to get as many as possible, and a check-in, I think, is also different, you know, based on the kids. You know, there's certain kids that are always green and flying, so, you know, I've told the teachers to do the summit check-in, so to speak, very quickly, but then that kid might also be super duper active in sports and activities and struggling with anxiety of keeping all that balance, so they might need that hand on their shoulder, like, are you doing okay, are you balancing, you know, life and school and that kind of stuff, versus the kid that needs the highly academic check-in, which, you know, obviously can happen as well. But yeah, mentoring is a huge piece. So to go back just to your point too, I wanted to add in that as I evaluate teachers and go through classrooms every single day, there's an old school mentality in there as well, that I would say 9 times out of 10, the teacher has the priority list up on the chalkboard. You know, it's like, you should be here working on this, here's when the blue line is about to pass, and, you know, make sure you have this in and this in and this in. So, I mean, they're getting that, and it doesn't help the parents, so to speak, but that's where you can log in and see things. But for, you know, the students who are still transitioning on this, they'll get the visual in the classroom as well. So it's helpful. It's helpful for me as well.
Right, just let me add in our students that are special education and have IEPs or possibly some 504 students, we do try to assign their mentor to be their intervention specialist so that there's a little bit of a smaller group and they get that more intense one-on-one and more direction on how to maintain their skill set.
Just noticed the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So we just were told that she's gonna be on the bus, and bus doesn't come until 8.
So
10.
middle school kids don't have first period.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have to put first period, I get it clear. So I have to put first period on the schedule because the high school and middle school teachers are required to be there at that time. So I do run some high school classes, the musics will run during first period, some AP courses will run during first period, and some math classes that my Polaris kiddos need, you know, to sneak in before they head out to Polaris for the day. So yeah, your classes aren't gonna start until second period. So when you get your schedule, the portal's gonna open on the 21st. You'll see that your child won't have a first period on the second period. Now, if you're going to drop your student off, the middle school gym will be available for students to be there, monitors in there. So if you need to drop them off at 7:30, you can, you know, just have to wiggle themselves over to the middle school gym, just like they used to be housed in the cafeteria. That doesn't exist.
Yeah,
Middle school
giant pile of dirt.
Middle school gym will be, where we'll house kiddos and drop them off a little bit early.
Yeah, so we've been saying mentoring, but it actually isn't on here. It just says lunch 1 or 2. So your children will have either mentoring first and then lunch, or lunch and then mentoring. So this is also middle school. Like high school lunch sometimes starts at 10. Like no one really enjoys lunch at 10 a.m. Especially if you're like a cross country runner and you got to run a couple miles over here. So there are plenty of places that grab a granola bar and drink some water and all those kind of things. So as long as kids do it appropriately. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So if they're not having one-on-one time with their mentor that day, what are they doing?
I make my students do schoolwork. So it's like a study hall. Some teachers, like I know Mr. Sawicki, who works with the 9th graders, he really wants kids to get into journaling. Like he really believes that journaling is a great way to reflect upon your learning process, and so he has his kids, you know, like journal every day. We tend to, like, there's a high school video announcements, and so on Fridays I'll watch the announcements, you know, with the students. So I try to have a schedule of mentor Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursdays are our communities where they're just going to find cool things that they like, where they have no tech and just talk. And then Fridays I tend to have like announcements, and I try to get kids to watch like TED Talks or like some kind of like exploratory video, like something interesting. There are kids who are like, I just need to do work. Can you just let me do work? I'm like, yeah, okay. And there are some kids who, like, if you got a rough schedule, you could probably use a 15-minute just chill, you know. And so that is very dependent on the student. But if your platform is all red, like Lee's was, you've missed your opportunity. You've probably been chilling for a month, like during class. So we need to get you to unchill and like, you know, work on stuff in class. It is very, like, that's where the relationship piece to what we do is super important. And the kids kind of get, like, if you don't know the kid well, it's kind of off-putting, like an adult who is really trying to like pry into your life and help you. So that's hard to kind of manage sometimes. I know you had a mentor group a couple years ago that was rough. They just did not want, like, Mrs. Nagy all up in their business all the time. Mrs. Nagy's like, that's my job. I'm gonna get all up in your business, and I'm gonna find like who needs what, when, and it gets rough. It's rough to always make a connection, you know, with the kids. So there are some people who really want us to have the same kid like all the way through. Mr. Vicka said, no, you gotta learn how to deal with different kinds of people. You know, like, so sometimes you might really enjoy Mrs. Connor as your mentor, and maybe you're stuck with Bruning and you don't really like that guy. So that's a huge part of life. So you're always getting new people. Some mentors, like, you know, some mentors really enjoy mentoring, and it's a really awesome process. Some mentors, it's very much just how you doing, look at this, and go from there. So it's highly, very, like everything in any people business. So I love it. Like I am so proud. I was hanging out with some of my teacher friends from Strong for the weekend, to brag about stuff like this. And like, are you serious? Like, you just hang out with kids for half an hour a day, just help them be better people? Yeah. Like, I get paid to help kids be better people. That is more valuable than, I mean, to me, it helps change my community more than make sure kids know what the powerhouse of the cell is. Like, that's gonna change my community more than that. So it's really, like, nobody is doing this to the level that we are right now. And again, the tool, the platform tool, helps us organize it. Like, I don't have to have a spreadsheet of who I've talked to and when. The first year we did this, there was no mentoring tool. It was insane. Like, it was and we didn't have mentoring time. You had to like sneak it in while, I mean, it was absolutely insanity. And the fact that our district has taken these fairly bold steps of every kid gets to meet with a mentor every day, I think is wonderful.
Just to add in a few things about mentoring, at the beginning of the year, we tend to, especially at the upper levels where we don't have OA, spend a lot of time on those habits of success to make sure that the students kind of understand what's expected and where they're going. I know last year with my mentor group, what I ended up doing during check-ins was I had the students all partner with somebody who had similar courses to them. So that way, if they needed assistance, they could kind of work together to make sure they understood what to do. And mentoring, sometimes we've even done like focus area days where I'll have the kids write on the board which focus areas they've mastered. And that way the kids that are struggling on those focus areas, now they know who to go to try and get some help with that. So the great thing about mentoring is there's lots of opportunities for the teachers and the students to work together on different things. Even though I teach math, it gives me an opportunity to really see what they're doing in other classes and help them through those things as well. So I think the mentoring is a huge part of our day. On the schedule, when you're able to get in, you said it's gonna be the 21st they can
21st, sure.
get in. You can actually see who your student's mentor is right on Power School. So, and you should hopefully be hearing from that mentor throughout the year as well.
That's where the kids write an email home. Middle school, it's once a week. They take a snapshot of their year view and say, this is what it looks like right now. This is strengths, weaknesses kind of stuff. They have goals there's like a form they kind of use. A form that they will use to say, this is my progress, what's going on. Mine shows up for my kids right away. If you're not getting those emails, I would not yell at the child. I'd first go to the mentor, hey, when is my kid supposed to be sending that email? I want my emails to say like, dear mom and dad, comma, new line, indentation, capital letter. This is what's going on in class today. I think it's very valuable to learn how to properly communicate. So that's we're teaching the skill of how to communicate like a professional. Mentoring's great. I really think the kids should learn how to use it. Oh, what I was gonna say, I know what I was gonna say. Generally, we don't let kids take focus areas in mentoring in the beginning of the year. That's kind of a no. Like let's make sure that like everything is aligned and you're doing what you need to do, because they just want to take them. And I probably this is an inappropriate analogy, but I call them the opiates of Fairview schools right now. Focus areas. They want to take them, they want to pass them, they get that quick high, and then they're like, oh yeah, like well, I have this giant project I still need to deal with, so we don't let them do those in the beginning part of the year. That's more for before school or SDL time. High school kids have study hall time where they can do those kind of things. So I don't think there's 6th grade study hall, probably not. No. So yeah, there's no 6th grade study hall. By the end of the year, maybe if there's kids who are lagging behind, that's when we try to figure out how to use that best.
And the other reason for that is because during mentoring, that's when I'm meeting one-on-one with students. So if I'm trying to approve assessments too, I have to look through their notes. So it's taking the time away from the students' one-on-one time that I'm gonna be meeting with people. So they have plenty of time either in office hours or during SDL time in each class that they can take those assessments. So we use that time to, we're doing our one-on-one mentoring. And then also as far as like what we do during that time, yes, they're working on work, but sometimes it's individual, sometimes they're working with a group. The kids think it's really cool to, I've already passed this focus area, can I help teach some students? They love that. Or I'll have a student that's like, hey, I'm not really understanding what we did in science today, can I meet with so-and-so? And they'll meet together and they'll talk about it and they're working on it, and it's really cool to see them take the lead and them be the ones to teach each other. They actually learn more more from that. So it's a time where they're able to do that too.
And when there are a few group project type things that we have, at least in high school, if there's a kid who I trust who has demonstrated that they're okay, they'll go from my mentor group to her mentor group and they'll work on things together, and we'll email, hey, did so-and-so make it? Yes, so-and-so's there. So we give, there's a little bit of flexibility with that mentor time as well, so it's pretty good. Sometimes, very rarely, but we'll have like whole school announcement-y things, like our grade level announcements during sixth grade. All the mentors go to the auditorium and talk about something's going on. So it's a good way for us to not disrupt the school day, to just take that half an hour and address those kind of things there. Again, mentoring's awesome. I love it. Okay, so the last thing we want to talk about today was grading. This is probably my favorite grading statement that's ever been written. Grades are informative, not punitive. So remember how you said the old school way? Oh, you didn't turn that in? 0. How much did you learn from that 0? Like, you probably were frustrated. You're mad, maybe. What? Yeah. Yeah. Crazy trombone. So, like, those kinds of things, like, nobody really gets anything out of a 0. There's insane amounts of research and evidence now that's saying, like, zeros do so much more damage. We should not hold 6th graders the same, well, they're going to go to college someday. You're right. Someday. Or they're going to go in a career someday. Not now. Like, the 0 in 6th grade is not going to help you get out. And even in 9th and 10th grade, like, zeros don't work. It is far more frustrating for the kid to have to get it done well eventually than get to 0. A lot of kids, and we've probably conditioned this out of our high school now, because these kids, well, now everyone 6 through 12 will have gone through this next year. They can turn in crap work for a crap grade and be perfectly happy. So no, we don't do that anymore. You've got to do this with fidelity, and then turn it in. So that's the whole basis of the grading system, is what have you demonstrated that you have understood. Now, we still give kids, they don't turn a project in, they have a 0 as a placeholder. So that if you're in a sport or activity, you're not going to go play, you're not going to run cross country if you haven't turned in any of your projects. You can get 0s, and it'll affect your GPA temporarily, and then there are the consequences of those kind of things. So the kids will get a 0, they'll get scored a 0, but it's not permanent. It's a placeholder. It's until you have finished this, and until you have completed the work to the satisfaction against the rubric. So we assess what we value, and we value what we assess. Those are skills. My first F in college was organic chemistry, and I did not know how to spell Dmitry, something Lithuanian's name on my test, and I got 10 points off of a 70-point test because I couldn't spell the TA's name, who I never went to because I didn't go to office hours. Is that really the most important bit of knowledge I learned in organic chemistry, was the name of my TA? That was worth more than 10%? Like, we do this all the time. That's the points for Kleenex and paper towels and whatnot. Like, so we should value what we assess. We should assess what we value. Those are skills. So the 80% of the grade is on the cognitive skills. And as back to what Mr. Vicka said, the wording in those skills, that is ACT language. Those are not easy words to figure out for most kids, probably 6 through 10. That language is rough, but we're conditioning them to be ready for when they are taking that test in high school. I don't know, anything else we need to go through here, Colleen?
No, I would have pointed to the same one, the grades are informative and not punitive. One of the nice things that we'll have an option of using this year in math classes is the test that we give, the unit assessment. Since math typically doesn't have quite as many projects as the other classes, that unit assessment will have the opportunity to have them put their answers in online as well as on paper. And the advantage to using the online system is it's going to give us an item analysis for each class, so that we'll be able to use that data better to understand what the kids know and what they don't know to inform our teaching going forward, rather than they just took the test, there was kind of bell curve, most of them understood it, we're gonna move on. Like, it's gonna give us hopefully a lot more information. So I think one of the big things we really try and do is use the grades to inform our teaching, use the data to inform what we do next, rather than just, I covered the material, they should know it, it's time to move on.
The other thing here is, participation versus homework. I was hanging out with my friend who has students in our district, and he is an intervention specialist in Strongsville, and he's mad because in Strongsville, like 90% of the kids' grades are on tests, and he's like, that is inherently stacked against many of the students with IEPs because they struggle to take tests, and it's really hard for them to master tests all the time. Like, well, here's your solution. Go away from a test-based system to a project-based system where we can work with the kid and go through the process and do the little bitty steps along the way to see what's going on. Because in the past, if you were nice and you showed up and you weren't disruptive, you like, oh, you turn this in right on time, okay, and the teacher didn't have time to grade like 120 worksheets every single day, so you got a check mark for it being in a box at the right time. Now we don't, it's not a participant grade, it is a what do you know, and that uncovers some skill gaps, and that is uncomfortable. So that is a huge part of a lot of the initial pushback on this is kids who traditionally were getting decent grades weren't. And some of your kids who are getting decent grades here, we are assessing them differently. It's great because now by the time they get to high school where the grades matter more, we will really know what skills they thrive on and what skills they need work on, and not just they were nice and they weren't a problem in the classroom. If I'm a parent and my kid gets a 4.2 GPA and a 16 on the ACT, I am very, very upset with my school system. Like, because that is not acceptable. You're getting above an A average, but you don't have a college-ready ACT score, there's a huge disconnect there. That's what we're doing this. In the past, every district I've ever been a part of, there's way too much on participation and having things in the right box at the right time, and not enough on what do you know? What do you demonstrate that you know? So by project-based assessments where we're working with the kids every single day, we know what they know and what they don't know with much more fidelity.
I think another data point, just from being in the district for 12 years and being in the high school specifically for a long time and talking to kids who've graduated is, you know, I won't quote the number, but it's in the 20%, it was in the 20%, is we have a lot of kids who will go and enroll in four-year colleges, and the retention rate in that four-year college within the first year was down to about 20%. Meaning of all of our kiddos who go to a four-year college, only about 20% were staying there. They were either dropping out or they were heading over to a community college. And that number, the number was hurtful, I would say, to all of our teaching staff, and especially me and the former administrators, because that's not what we want. There's nothing worse than showing up at a basketball game or a football game the following year after kid graduates and the kid comes up to you and says, man, I was not prepared for college, and now I'm in remedial courses or this, and this is a kid, and this is a true story, these are kids that were graduating with 3.5, 4.0, and just kind of getting hammered, and really what I attribute that to is just grit. You know, we were providing a lot of the knowledge and so on, but it was in a way that they weren't really retaining it, they weren't using it, and as well as just kind of turning up the grit on these kiddos by making them do things better and doing them in a different way. So while the data is not there yet, because my seniors now are the first crew to go all the way through this, it's definitely something that myself, Melanie, and Dr. Wagner are looking at through use of Naviance. So that'll be a term they get to know. Naviance is a program our school counselors use to track the kiddos all the way through college. Looking at what that retention rate is going to be. We're excited about it because we will go and talk to professors and right out of their mouth they'll say, this is exactly what the kiddos are getting. We're excited about this. We've got so many partnerships with CSU, we've done with ACE, and they look at the same thing. These are the skills that we're looking for these kids to have. College is changing a little slower than we are right now. But you go out in the business world, and you go and talk to people out in the business world, and they're like, this is what we need.
And here's the
We
winner
need that grit.
Candyland.
Job. You gotta come with something.
All these.
But that college retention rate is a data point that I think we should also focus on. Because I don't like it. We're better than that.
Yeah, and that's not a Fairview thing. I worked at Strongsville for 10 years, Medina Highland for 1 year, and I was senior class advisor at Medina Highland, and you had to be able to apply for something, you had to have above a 3.5. 50% of the graduating class had above a 3.5. Like, well, that's amazing, or not rigorous. Like, so I'm more of the pessimist saying, we're not challenging you enough. And Strongsville is about a third of the senior class had above a 3.5. So how honorable is it to be a National Honor Society if half of your school is in? Like, you're not really differentiating very well if that's the way it works. So this is how the grades are calculated. Like this is something you're never going to want to do on your own, but if you really care, this is the algorithm to figure out grade. So you have 80% is the project cognitive skills. This is math, or it's supposed to be 14 and 6 there though, whatever this. But anyways, this is how you would calculate a kid's grade. This is done automatically, live. It is done. You never have to do this. I've never had to do it for anyone. You can go into the grade tab for a kid. It's called Progress. So it's this little graphy looking doohickey. You go into Progress, and it will tell you all the grades. So someone in one of the evening sessions was like, well, they don't have a GPA. No, they have to have a GPA. Like, they're required for all the athletics and stuff. They have a GPA. And when they leave here, no one's like, oh, you have a summit GPA? No, they have a regular old GPA. It's just stuff. So you can click on any one of these, and it will tell you exactly what's going on in English. Like, why do we have a C+ in science? So you can click on here, and it'll show you more information than you've ever wanted to know. Like, there's tons of stuff. You should keep clicking through here. Each of the chunks, you're at 65% of this chunk, you're at 14% of this chunk, and they haven't done any of their additionals. So this is where the mentor and the parent and the kid can say, hey, well, where should I put my time? Like, this is where you set a goal. Where do I figure out what's the best bang for my buck? Where do I go? What do I work on here? To figure out if you should work on the skills, like you can see these skills right here, these were used in a project, and they're not going to be assessed again. These are the skills that are coming out. So that in this next project, they're going to work on these skills, so you can see how to, where to put their time. So that's, and it's easy. You can scroll through here. You can figure out what's going on. Again, some of the kids may initially not be at the same level they were at before. We're assessing them differently. You're like, well, my kids had all A's before. Well, it's kind of had to have all A's if it's like those standards-based grading, right? Like, I'm sure some of those standards here and there, they were not all the way there. We're trying to figure out how to figure out exactly where to put your time. In the past, if someone got a B- in English, are you not good at reading? Are you not good at comprehension? Are you not good at writing? Are you not good at fiction? Are you not good at nonfiction? Like, all those different kinds of things. Now we can figure out where to help those kids for each skill.
And the skills at the beginning of the year tend to be lower, hopefully, or
Yes.
usually, than the skills at the end of the year. So it's very common for students to have a lower grade at the beginning of the year and a higher grade at the end of the year, because those skills are assessed multiple times throughout the year. So if you have a student who's typically an A student in math, and at the beginning of the year, like the first quarter, they have a C, I always tell them, don't freak out. Like, there's still time. We're going to increase this, and that quarter grade is not something that's going to stick with you. The grade they get at the end of the year is the grade they have for that class for the whole year. So it's okay for them to start a little slower. Let's watch that before we eat it, please. Sorry. It's okay for them to start a little slower, and then hopefully they improve those skills as they go.
So that
And I would note that your high school transcript, because that's what I get all the time, is, oh my God, the kid's got a C in the first quarter, and now it's gonna be on his transcript, and it's, he'll never get into college with a stream. It's only the final grade. So the final grade is what goes on the transcript. So all these grades are going up and down and up and down and up and down throughout the year. While it looks a little crazy during the year, when we certify and stamp that final grade, that's what's reported to the transcript.
And that's not new, right?
No.
That's the way it's been
That's
since
how it's
day one.
always been.
When I was.
But now the student has a chance to see and do something about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Versus throwing their hands up or not even
Saying
being
that-
aware.
Correct, and that's a great
Yeah.
point, that, yes,
Yeah.
that student can actually go back and then fix that C in the first quarter, to increase that percentage that's gonna get averaged over the 4 quarters to make that final grade.
Yeah,
There are two grade point averages. There's the running one, it's, again, a snapshot, a point in time, and then there's the didn't we talk about your accum? There's the accumulated grade point average, which is a function of only courses that are complete. And that is standard, it's been standard for 50 years at least, and since I was in high school, and it's standard around the state and the nation.
The lack of averaging, if you want to question this, there's a book called The End of Average by Todd Rose that absolutely changed how I thought about this. His best example was when they were first making fighter planes, they took all the measurements of the airmen, and they were like, whatever, 5'7" and 140 pounds or something. And they are like all these measurements, and they made the cockpit for the average pilot, and they crashed all the planes. And they had great pilots, and then they made the seats adjustable, and they were perfectly fine. So averaging is something that has happened to us our entire lives. There's literally zero evidence that it's a good strategy to see how well someone's doing at anything. So that's why we don't do it anymore. And parents like, I don't get this. Well, it was done for industrial revolution type processes, and we're well past all those kind of things. So if you want to have that conversation, that book will change it for you. I think we've gone through all the how do we help our kids go through these. Grades you can find in this progress tab. Your kids will rapidly become much better at this than you will. It's kind of unnerving to think that 11 and 12-year-olds can but they're going to be dealing with it every single day. Mr. Hicks will teach all of this in the Operation Bandit class for 6th grade stuff. So that's how they go there, and it's like you said, it's a snapshot. They could be awesome one day, and the next day a project's graded, and they could go down temporarily until they fix that project stuff. I know at one point we are actually going to probably talk about this week of how frequently we're posting grades to PowerSchool. If you really literally like PowerSchool, we're trying to find some way where we can, as staff and community, come meet some middle road here. How do we want to do this? So that has not been determined yet, but some of us in this room are going to talk about this week at some point to figure out, should we have midterm, mid-quarter grades, let people know what's going on? In the past, at the end of every quarter, I would put 0 grades in the gradebook and say, go check Summit. And some people are like, that's not very cool. So we have to figure out how to meet the community in the middle.
Well, also too, because Summit's only some of the classes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
PowerSchool will have all of it.
PowerSchool will have gym and for music and art and all those kinds of things. Then there comes a philosophical thing. If you didn't turn something in art, you still just turn it in later. Because in Summit classes, that's kind of how we roll. So the whole district is trying to move that kind of way. But sometimes it's good to have different ways, to learn how to do what in different situations.
I'd also caution, just spoke on this the last time, with the PowerSchool crosswalk. I mean, you just saw the amount of data that you can pull as a parent in the platform with the grade, and you get that running grade every day. And I get it, 2 systems is a pain in the butt. But on PowerSchool, you're gonna get a grade, you might get a comment, and you're gonna have, there's gonna be very little bit of substance there as to how to help your child. So more than likely, you'll end up walking over into the platform anyway with your kid, opening up the current status and figuring stuff out. So that's why we have kind of taken the stance of, we know it's tough because some are in PowerSchool and some are in platform, but you can see the amount of data that you can pull. As a parent myself, I'd rather be able to, I think you could pinpoint what my kiddo needs to do versus just seeing that the kid's got a D in English and, the comment says needs to turn in homework. That doesn't tell me specifics, the detail of what I would need to know. So I'm up for having the conversation, but I don't know.
Well, we're just trying to find a way to bridge a gap.
And oftentimes, by the time you look at the grade on PowerSchool, it's changed on here. So then you get the confusion of, well, wait a minute, PowerSchool's saying my kid has this grade, but Summit's saying this. And so because those grades do change so quickly and so often, by the time you've looked in PowerSchool, oftentimes it's changed. Even a lot of times when the kids are writing their mentoring email, or the email to you guys that they're gonna write weekly during mentoring, I'll even have kids that say, wait, can I wait to send this screenshot until after I've taken this assessment, cause I'm gonna be taking it in science today. Like, they know how quickly their grades change, and they know, that it's not gonna be the same maybe in the morning as it is by the time they finish that school day.
One quick thing, sorry, just to throw in, at the beginning of the year, there will be no letter grade in any of the courses until a project has been turned in and graded. Did we
Yes.
mention that?
No, that's.
Okay, so like at the beginning of the year, when you're going in and you're looking at that progress tab, it's gonna say like NA
Or it's
for a little bit
incomplete.
until that first project has been turned in, simply because projects are worth 80% of the grade, so we can't calculate a grade without having a project. It doesn't mean there's nothing for you to look at. If you click on, like on that top line, if you were to click on the project itself, you can actually see with the checkpoints where they're at. And I know in previous sessions, we've talked about what the red, yellow, and the green means. So if you have a student and you're clicking on that project and you're seeing all red, even though there's no grade to tell you that they're not on track, they're not on track. So kind of use that as your guide with your student to help you to know, so that it's not like, well, we're 8 weeks into school and I don't see a grade, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's always rough. because
She's-
in the beginning, we take a long time to say, like, how do I do projects in my course? And so, you might not have that grade, so, we're trying to do that. Like, I think a lot of us have realized that now, let's make sure we have something that's finishable in the first quarter. Any other questions on, I guess, anything? I guess, thank you.
Yes, thank you for
If you need
coming
anything,
again.
let us know.
Nice
We'll
to
do
see a
this
familiar face.
again next Monday. I'm sorry, I know that the calendar was, it said 8 AM. Next Monday is 8:30 as well. So someone showed up at 8 AM and I apologize for that. So, okay, sorry. So.
It gave
If you ever
a
get
chance
here